Hi there, my name's Matthew, and I've been making games for 20 years. In that time, I've worked across the world, working with a wide variety of teams to bring great experience into players' hands. Across that time, I've built up a wide amount of knowledge and experience in what it means to make games, but also build studios and develop teams on how to unite them towards that shared vision of delivering a great experience for players to play. I'm now looking to share that knowledge with you, and in this series, we'll be looking on how to set up your own studio. In today's episode, we'll look at the foundations, what it means to set a studio vision, studio mission, and our culture, as well as looking at steps to make a plan and goals towards the future. I hope you'll join me on this journey. Let's figure it out together. So this is a document I've set up to help anyone who's looking to start their own studio. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to follow my own advice and go through each of these steps, and you'll follow along as I go about these things to set up the studio foundations. What's going to be our defining principles and what's going to be our defining reference tone that we use as we go on this journey. So this document gives a primer on what common and critical areas of consideration are required when setting up a game studio. It's important to ensure that these are documented and shared throughout the studio. This encourages buy-in and ensures a shared set of expectations and understanding across these areas. There are some areas like finances, legal structure that will require some discretion or sensitivity, so decisions around these should be made on a case-by-case basis. Though it is important to note that increased transparency leads to increased trust. So we're going to define the vision. So answering the question, why a game studio? There are many types of businesses you can start, and many different types of tech businesses to start. But the making of games is a unique crossover between the technology and creative industries that offers specific opportunities and a range of challenges. Having a why we make games statement or sentence gives you a touchstone that you as founders can draw strength from. It also acts as a banner for your team to gather under and lead from a common ground. So why a game studio? So I love making games. I love video games, playing them, making them. But for me, it's about stories. I love telling stories. So my studio will tell stories. That's why a game studio. And it's people who tell stories. And stories exist in a community. So these three statements here, my studio will tell stories, it's people who tell stories, and stories exist in a community, formulate the why we make games. I want to be able to tell stories. I want to be able to work with people to tell their stories. And I also want to help create a community where storytelling through the medium of video games is appreciated and seen as a craft as well as a business. So this is our vision. This is why a game studio, not just making films or making TV, because you can tell stories like that. Become a writer. But this is because the unique way that video games operate in the way that they tell stories is something that really, really excites me. There are so many different ways of telling it, and you can engage with different audiences through the different platforms that you can release on. So our big three things here are going to be my studio will tell stories, recognizing that it's people who tell stories, and stories, they exist within a community. So the third one I think is important because community isn't just the people who make a game and the people who play a game. The term community manager often is about the relationship between developer and audience and players. But what I'm really talking about there is the community of humanity and people. Game developers are people, but non-game developers and non-game players are people too. And I want the stories that our studio is telling to resonate with them, to maybe interest people into trying video games, or to acknowledging that video games are a valid and exciting and unique way that their stories can be told. And for them to consume stories and engage with stories. So this is our vision statement. Now, these are the touchstones, these are the foundations that I'm going to be referring to throughout everything that I do. Is I will ensure that we tell stories, that I'm focused on the people who are telling those stories, and cognizant of the fact that the communities in which we operate, not just our players and developing studio, but the entirety of the community. So let's take a moment to explore these in greater detail. So why we make games? Why are we telling stories? Stories are an important part of the human experience. Storytelling, the stories we tell can be educational, they can be allegorical, they can be humorous, they can be entertaining, they can be poignant, they can be all sorts of things. But they all reflect human experience. And we are continuing this rich history of sharing stories, sharing our stories with those around us. Video games are just another medium for us to tell stories, to share stories. And this is why we're making games, to share stories that are part of that human experience and to continue that tradition of telling stories in a more modern and more recent storytelling method. So people tell stories. So why are we having this as part of our vision? Why is people telling stories why we make games? Stories are inherently personal. So that's why it's important to acknowledge the individual and the person. They come from a human perspective, and they involve and elicit human emotions. So why we make games? Because stories are inherently personal, because stories come from a human perspective, they involve and elicit human emotions, and games as a medium have a very unique way to help put an audience in the position of interactivity, and either influenced by or influencing the world in which they exist. So it's a way that we can control to a very nuanced degree that perspective, but also to elicit the emotions of your player, of your audience, in ways that other medium can't generally do. And that's why we're telling stories through video games, and that's why this studio is going to make games. Stories exist in a community. Let's think about this one, because it is, a bigger sort of conversation rather than just developer and audience. Stories draw from a range of experiences. And they can bring people together. They exist in the context of which they are created and in which they are told. So this recognizes the context that the community that is creating the stories, but also where the audience is as well, where they're told, because stories shared require a teller and a listener. And so that is the development team and the audience. So stories exist in, let's make that explicit, that it's stories exist in the context of which they are created and in which they are told. Building and fostering a community with and around our stories is what we aim to achieve. So that's the other aspect I was talking about, was that wanting to build a community of storytellers and people who appreciate stories through the medium of video games. So here we go. We've got a pretty good starting vision statement. So why we make games? My studio will tell stories. Stories are an important part of the human experience. We are continuing this rich history of sharing stories with those around us. It's people that tell stories. Stories are inherently personal. They come from a human perspective, and they involve and elicit human emotions. And stories exist in a community. Stories draw from a range of experiences, and they can bring people together. Stories exist in the context of which they are created and in which they are told. Building and fostering a community with and around our stories is what we aim to achieve. So that is why we make games, to tell stories, to have people and their emotions and their perspectives told, and bringing people together, fostering a community around video games and our stories. This is why we're making games. So now we've got our vision. Let's have a look at mission, or what type of games we'll be making. There are many types of games you can make. You can even make technology that supports or allows others to make games. But the types of games you make informs a lot of decisions around your hiring, resourcing, business plan, and marketing. Having a "we make games" that statement gives you a guiding lens to all your decisions and choices. It also tells your team what all of their work should include or be based in. It's also important to have an answer to why you've chosen the type of games you're making. This gives context to your team, as well as the boundaries to your decisions as founders. So this mission goes beyond just wanting to make a certain genre of games. It does include that, and there is an element of that. But it also is about what types of games, what types of experiences are you looking to make? This helps set those boundaries, both creatively but also business-wise, and it can make it a lot easier to make decisions around whether you are going to pursue something or where you're going to spend your time and money and energy and moving forwards, to make sure that they're aligned to your mission. So for our studio, we know we're going to make games about stories. So we make games that tell a story. I want to make it clear that this can be a story within the game, but it can also be the story of the people who made the game. So that's just pointing out that, we aren't just going to be making narrative novel games. So that is a genre that is perfect for telling stories, but a lot of genres are capable of telling stories in different ways. But that we want to be story centric. So, what is the story that we're telling? Whether, explicitly telling a story like a book or a film or any other sort of medium like that, but just through video games? Or are we telling a personal story and using video games in interaction to offer nuance or offer unique ways of eliciting that emotion of communicating the story? So I want to also make it clear that, because we've said different genres, like, I want to make it clear that we aren't constrained by genre. Instead, we work within genres that best support and tell the stories we are sharing. So that means that we're open to all sorts of genres, but ensuring that we're telling a story, ensuring that the genre selection supports that storytelling and that methodology. I think that this too sums up our mission pretty well. What we make games that tell a story. This can be a story within the game, but it can also be a story of the people who made the game. And we aren't constrained by genre. Instead, we work within genres that best support and tell the stories we are sharing. So now we've got our vision. We tell stories, recognizing it's people who tell stories, and stories exist in a community. The type of games we make do tell a story, but we aren't constrained by genre. Instead, we work with genres that are there. One thing we haven't done is why are we doing this? We want to, telling stories is our studio vision. We acknowledge multiple genres tell stories, but they offer their own unique ways to do so. It is important to match story themes and content with the game genre and player journey. Game genre, player journey, and player interactions that best suit the story. It's important to match story themes and genre and content with the game genre, player journey, and player interactions. So this is why we're doing this. So our mission: we make games that tell a story. This can be a story within the game, but it can also be the story of the people who made the game. We aren't constrained by genre. Instead, we work within genres that best support and tell the stories we are sharing. And why are we doing this? Why are we making these types of games? Because telling stories is our studio vision. This is why we make games, is telling stories. But we also acknowledge that multiple genres can tell stories, but they offer their own unique ways to do so. It's important to match the story themes and content with the game genre, player journey, and player interactions. So now we've got our mission to make games that tell a story across genres that support those stories. Story is central, whether that's the story of within the game, so the narrative within the game, or story of the people who have made the game or contributing to the game. Now we move to culture. So how do you want to operate? It's important at the earlier stages to think about how you want to make games. This is the thing that setting a foundation for at the start, and the earlier you get on top of and be conscious in your choices around culture, the easier it is to set the standard for how you want to be making games. Culture change is a very in-depth and non-immediate process. So it's important to, as much as possible, maintain this and be on top of it, but equally important, if not more important, to set right from the get-go. So culture goes beyond a statement about belonging or intentions. Culture is an important thing to define and communicate as it informs the day-to-day experience for your team. Culture informs the actions of everyone in your studio. Culture is something that studio and team leaders need to embody and demonstrate through their words and actions. Speaking about your studio culture is a useful tool for accountability for everyone. It is also a useful tool to help educate and direct preferred behaviors and change management across all members of the studio. So there's a concept that was shared with me that culture is behaviors plus action. So how do you do the thing, but also what you're doing. So let's have a think about how we want to operate. How do we want to work? And sort of like, how's that going to reflect in what we do? Because our vision has people tell stories, I think it's important to acknowledge that, you know, people are at the center here. So we are going to use human-centered approaches. So we always consider the people or person involved. We ensure that each contributor and those that are part of or involved in the story are consulted or engaged with. So this puts people at the center of what we're doing. We've acknowledged in our vision that it's people who tell stories. So if we're going to tell stories, we need to engage with people. We need to be involving them in this each steps of what we do. So whether that's the developers or any circumstances that come up or talking to a publisher, we're going to always consider that person or the people involved in those choices and decisions and those discussions. And we're going to ensure that everyone who's contributing to what we do, or if it's their story we're telling, or if it's a story from their culture or their community, that they're consulted and engaged with as part of that process. We also, the other part of our vision statement, we kind of in our mission kind of talked about how we're telling stories, and that's the what. So I really want to kind of have an element here speaking to our third part of the vision, which is community. So we are community conscious and community minded. So what does this mean? This means that we are conscious and aware of the context in which we're telling stories and making stories. And we'll also keep that in our mind for any sort of initiatives that we want to do. Community not just being developers and players, but also the wider communities in which we all exist in. So we're going to consider the environmental environment the environmental environment, the environmental community, so nature, the world in which we inhabit. We are going to cultural. We're going to be conscious and minded of the community, the cultural communities in which we operate in, the political, and the economical environments. So all the things, what we're going to be doing is ensuring that our decisions run through these things, that we're considering, that we are aware of, and considering the environmental, cultural, political, and economic impacts, and also effects on the game development and the stories we're making. So this, culture is something that develops over time, but I think that if we use these things as our guiding principles for how we want to operate, I think we're starting off on a good foundation. As this is a solo studio, I only have to consider myself, and so I have to keep myself to this standard. So here, having it written down means that I am ensuring that I am considering the people at the center of the stories we're telling, but also the communities in which we operate in as well. So once you've got your vision, your mission, and your culture, so why we make games, what games we're making, and how are we going to do that, it's also important to acknowledge the key responsibilities. So who do you need to succeed? The who. For my specific scenario, I am a solo developer. So my studio is a studio of one. A team of one is still a team, which is why it's important to have team culture and team behaviors in the foundations. But these key responsibilities are it's still important for me to acknowledge and identify so that I am aware of them each step of the way. If you're doing this with some friends, some colleagues, some other people in the industry, maybe a business partner, these are the key areas that it's important to kind of have covered. Multiple people can serve multiple roles. I've put titles next to these so that you can kind of get an idea of what types of people and titles these are. When you're starting a studio, don't be caught up in the title, but do ensure that someone is covering these responsibilities, because the further you get down the track and you realize someone is not across these, you suddenly have to do a lot of work to catch up and get that part of the business and studio up to where the other parts are. So let's go into the key responsibilities. Who do you need to succeed? There are some important areas of responsibility that should be covered in your core team before you look to expand. By ensuring someone is adequately covering these areas, you should be able to cover any circumstances that may arise. It's important to note that one person may cover multiple areas of responsibilities. However, all founders should be vigilant that no one person is taking on too much work and that all responsibilities are being served for the studio. Titles are listed as suggestions and research further if desired. So you need the business leader. This is the person that covers the mission and vision areas of the studio. It's their responsibility to ensure everything the business does benefits or moves towards fulfilling the mission and the vision. They should also ensure alignment or agreement on the type of business structure for the studio, whether that is private company, public company, partnership, or a co-op, or any other way that you can structure your business. You need a creative leader. This is the person who is responsible for the games you're making. It's their responsibility to ensure that all games are defined and have what they need to succeed. I go into further detail in the game development planning, which we'll cover in a future episode. The financial leader. The financial leader is the person who is responsible for the budget and finances of the studio. It's their responsibility that money is sourced and managed correctly and accurately across income and expenditure. They're often teamed with the people leader to define and guide the game studio business plan, which, again, we'll cover in a future episode. And then we have people leader. This is the person who is responsible for the culture and processes of the studio. It's their responsibility to ensure the team has everything they need to succeed and that every team member is operating as expected. So these are the 4 areas of a studio that having someone across, or if you're a solo developer like me, you ensure that you are fulfilling each of these roles. If at any point one of these becomes too much for me to handle, that's when I would look to expand, right? That's where I need additional support. That expansion doesn't have to be bringing someone on as a full-time member. It could be, I want to talk to someone who's really, really good at product planning and to ensure that my creative vision is possible, that it makes sense. So I could work with a consultant. I could be talking to, an accountant to help me ensure that my finances are all in order, and not just to file my taxes, but to ensure that all of the budget makes sense and that I'm not forgetting something. So it's important that somebody is looking after each of these areas and that none of these fall behind the others. When you are in a position to expand and one of these has been missing, taking the time and energy and effort to catch up that area to a way that you can expand does take time and a lot of effort. So the earlier you can get on top of this and the more regular and consistent you can get in engaging in these, ensure they are covered, the better. So now we've got our vision, our mission, our culture statements, and we've also identified the key responsibilities and ensuring that they're all covered. We're ready to start, but where are we heading? It's important to build for the future even from the start. It is difficult this stage, particularly when you're just starting out. But this is just a process more as a founder to ensure that you are engaging in these things. Future plans can always change, but they should all still be within the framework of your vision, your mission, and your culture. And if extra work is created for any of those key responsibilities, that someone is looking after them. So where are we headed? This is often the most difficult to quantify. We all start a studio with grand ideas and hopes, but this future planning is about setting goals and expectations. This is a living statement that should adjust to the changing situations externally in the industry as well as internally to your studio. The future plan should be guided by an idea that I use called practical aspiration. That is something that is ambitious but still within reality. This helps set or inform the steps to move towards and advance the studio vision and the studio mission. So let's explore that concept of practical aspiration. Aspirations are something that you're striving towards, that are above and beyond. They belong to the realms of hopes and dreams. But practical aspiration is steps along the way to help you achieve that. The framework I like to use is we are trying to get to the moon. So that is our aspiration, get to the moon. And practical aspiration is how big is that ladder and where are the rungs so we can climb to the moon. So have that lofty goal, have that high intention, but let's try to break it down into practical steps along the way. So it's important to acknowledge this is often an open conversation and thought process that explores the following questions. What does your studio aim to achieve in the next year, in 5 years, in 10 years? And what do you want to achieve as a studio director or founder? This is personal to each of the people starting the studio, but should be cohesive with each other and the studio. So this is your own personal mission statement, your own personal vision, why you're a part of this studio, why you're putting in the time, energy, and effort, and oftentimes your own money to create your own studio. Why are you doing it? This is a statement for you. As with all things in our future plan, this can be malleable and change as you change and the studio changes. But there are important things to discuss with your other founders. As a solo dev, I just have to talk to myself. And I can talk with you as well. So you can see how my thought process goes, and I can come to a more formed conclusion around this. One thing I will note is that it's important to note that the game industry is constantly evolving. So be prepared to learn new technologies and adapt to changing trends. Be sure to return to these questions on a regular basis, but also whenever there are major shifts in the external environment or internal environment. So if your studio changes for whatever reason, or the game you're making changes, or something in the games industry changes that impacts what you're doing. And it is okay to adjust your future plan based on the changing present. So for now, let's start this off. What do I want to achieve for this studio in the next year? In 1 year, we want to release 1 game. Done. So that's our aspiration. Let's make it practical. We will ensure scope and project plans match can be fulfilled in 12 months or less. It's important that, we are putting that aspiration of one game in 1 year. But that 1 year, we could release it earlier, and we've met that aspiration. That's practical aspiration. So we're going to make it practical. We're going to control the scope and our plans and ensure that it's fulfilled in 12 months. But we can maybe do it in less. We'll see what our first game looks like. In 5 years, we want to have released 5 games. And expanded the team or contributors to 5. This aspiration, I want to be able to, because we want to tell stories, we want to release multiple games. We want to tell multiple stories. One of the principles that I am very keen to have defined here in our future plan is 1 game every year. So that's why 5 years, 5 games. I also want to expand the team or contributors to 5. That means that I'm working with up to 5, hopefully 5 additional people, whether they're a full member of the studio in some capacity, or a collaborator, or a developer that we are supporting from a publishing aspect. There are a lot of ways that we can kind of engage with contributors. But I'd like to be able to work with, with 5 people within that 5 years. We will do this by replicating our intentions and processes from year 1. So this is basically, well, we've made 1 game in 1 year, so let's make 1 game every year using the same sort of processes and intentions of that, ensuring the scope and project plans can be filled in 12 months. But let's engage as well with a variety of game makers and storytellers within our communities. So that way that we're starting to find contributors or people who may want to join the team or would be a good fit for the team. So we're going to engage with the community as well, and provide opportunity. Let's state that we could provide opportunities for collaborators to come to us. We could approach potential collaborators with partnership discussions. So partnership doesn't necessarily mean the formal business definition of partnership. It can be we are working together to do this, and we are going to do this together. So that is that practical aspiration. The aspiration is that we are going to expand the team, and we're going to do that by engaging with the communities. And then a couple of options just that came to mind now that we could provide those opportunities, but we could also deliberately approach certain collaborators as well. We don't need to define that now. Remember that we can adjust and change these. And once we have things going, we can define those a bit better. But I'm just tracking those now so that we are aware of them. So in 10 years, we want to have released 10 games and helped other storytellers to release 5 games. So in the first 5 years, we want to have expanded the team to 5, or the number of contributors who are contributing to the games we're making to 5. But in 10 years, we want to also have helped 5 other storytellers to make their games as well. So we've released 10 games with a team of around 5, or maybe more. We'll say 5 for now. And then also helped other storytellers to release 5 games. So in 10 years, our studios helped 15 games come to life. 10 for ourselves and 5 for other people and other storytellers. This one is a little bit further in the future, but we are going to do this by replicating our intentions and processes from year 1 to year 5. We will engage with the community. We will engage with the community and connections we have made in the first 5 years. So that's where we're going to leave that for now. Just that practical aspiration of 10 years is a very long time and a lot can happen. So we're going to leave that one a little bit flexible. But we are going to keep the 10 games in 10 years and helped other storytellers to release 5 games. So this is our future plan right here. In 1 year, we want to release 1 game. In 5 years, we want to have released 5 games and expanded the team or contributors to 5. In 10 years, we want to have released 10 games and helped other storytellers to release 5 games. So that's the future plan that we have at this time at the founding of the studio. So, following this first page of Studio Foundations of this document, vision, we have the why we're making a game studio. We have the mission, so the what type of games we're making. We have the culture, which is how we're going to operate. The key responsibilities and identified who we have. And where are we headed? The future planning. We have that now. So we have everything we need to start a foundation. Everything, that is, except a name. So this is where I have the great joy of sharing with you the news that I founded a studio called StarCore. At StarCore, we tell stories. Stories are an important part of the human experience. We are continuing this rich history of sharing stories with those around us. At StarCore, we recognize people tell stories. That stories are inherently personal, they come from a human perspective, and they are human emotions. We also acknowledge that stories come from community. Stories draw from a range of experiences and can bring people together. They exist in the context of which they are written and in which they are told. Building and fostering a community with and around our stories is what we aim to achieve. At StarCore, we make games to tell stories, to express our human experiences, and create community through our stories. We are not constrained by genre. Instead, we embrace game types and styles that best express the story we are telling. We utilize human-centered approaches. We always consider the people or person involved. We ensure that each contributor and those part of the story are involved or consulted. We are community conscious and community minded, including the environmental, cultural, political, and economical. In our first year, StarCore will release one game. In 5 years, we plan to have released 5 games and expanded the team or team of contributors to 5. And in 10 years, we plan to have released 10 games and helped other people release 5 additional games. I started StarCore because I want to tell interesting stories through the medium of video games. As part of this process, I want to create a community of game makers, game players, and story lovers who are united in expressing themselves and delighting in others' expressions. I certainly hope you'll join me along the journey. See you next episode.